Okay, it's just gone 10:30 and welcome to the third episode as our Lift As You Rise webinar, which provides a platform to engage and collaborate with entrepreneurs and experts who think global and act local. Lift As We Rise is brought to you by StratAstute Consulting, a management consulting company offering specialist advisory and consulting services in the spaces of sustainable business strategies, the execution of business critical projects, strategic marketing and communications, and purpose-driven engagement with stakeholders. You can visit www.stratastute.co.za to read more about our business and unique service streams. So if you are joining us for the first time, a warm welcome to you. If you are new to technology and to Zoom, please don't be intimidated. It's actually quite easy. We love to keep this forum interactive. There's a chat box that you'll find on your screen, and that chat box is for you to use to post your comments, questions on there. We've got a really experienced panel with us today, and I'm sure they'd love to hear your comments and also try and tackle your questions. Just some admin before we get into it. If you can please turn off your videos and mute your microphones. And if you do happen to lose connection at any one point in time, please do follow the same link, reconnect, and if you're having problems, then Theo or Tejal will help you in the background. So today we're talking about social entrepreneurship and the business case for socially responsible investment. You might wonder, how do these things come together? Well, I've had the privilege of working in the space of finance, risk management, and entrepreneurial strategies for more than a decade, and for most of that period, the themes of sustainability, responsible investment, and global citizenship to my peers and colleagues sounded like idealistic and future aspirations, I must admit, especially to the number crunchers. However, the recent trend of natural disasters that we saw before COVID-19, the humanitarian crises, climate change phenomena, and then the tumultuous consequences of COVID-19 have all compelled leaders across business and society to rethink our existing profit-driven capital models and to do some critical thinking around why their businesses and institutions exist. Between the boardroom and the bailouts are people, communities, and future generations whose interests do actually impact our current business models, value chains, and risk landscapes. But as business leaders and owners, we sometimes forget that what happens at the bottom of the pyramid on a day-to-day basis impacts profits, performance, and economic prosperity in the medium and long term. This is if we look at things from the lens of a responsible leader. So interestingly, I was just having a chat to the panel earlier on that last week, the United Nations convened a roundtable think tank consisting of female economists from all over the world to take a look at sustainable development, to pull us through this crisis and to do so in a reimaginative way. And quite coincidentally today, here we are with an all-female panel of change makers. And these ladies do some amazing work in the NGO, corporate, and global policy level space. So let me introduce you to our panel. Joining us from Granada, Spain, and a regular visitor to the Nelson Mandela Bay is Dr. Victoria Galán Munoz, a leading consultant and policy advisor who has, for more than a decade, acted as a catalyst between universities, business, and policymakers across 30 countries. Victoria has also co-authored more than 50 consulting reports for the European Commission, the OECD, governments, and universities. Dr. Victoria Galán Munoz, welcome to you. Corley LaRue is our second panelist, and Corley is joining us from a chilly Johannesburg today. Corley is an independent specialist in sustainability, strategy, and governance. Corley was a senior leader at the JSE for more than 16 years, which is where I met her, and she was working there as the head of legal counsel and sustainability. Corley led the JSE Socially Responsible Investment Index, and you corporate people will know that as SRI. And hello to you, Corley. Corley also has family down the road from us in Jeffreys Bay, so her heart's also in the Eastern Cape. Then to those who are from Nelson Mandela Bay, you'll need no introduction to Linda van Oudheusden, Marketing Manager at Mission Vale Care Centre. And prior to that, Linda was also in the high heel suits and briefcase brigade in a corporate career. So ladies, it's an absolute honor today to welcome you on the panel. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roshni.
So we do have a big topic, but I do believe that your expansive experience and very practical implementation skills that will be able to help me contextualize the concepts of responsible business, responsible investment, and also the stronger together principle that StratAstute Consulting it advocates quite strongly. So I hope, listeners, that you enjoy the show and that you take something away from it. Please do give us your comments and questions as we go along. So panel, let's get straight into it. Victoria, let's start with you. You have a really interesting career across academia, institutions, and corporations. You've worked across 30 countries, as we've said, and you've spent quite a bit of time in the emerging markets, South America, South Africa, Southeast Asia. I must declare to everyone that we didn't meet at an airport lounge or at a futures conference, but instead we met right here at the Mission Vale Care Centre during one of your business trips. And at that stage, it became clear to me that there is something bigger and meaningful about organizations that make an actual difference to the life of other human beings. Yet, this type of work or business model hasn't become mainstream. Victoria, can you unpack for us the difference between entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, and then what is responsible global citizenship?
Okay, that's a first tough question, Roshni. But thank you very much again. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Well, here at home, virtually with you in PE. You know, part of my heart is there, and this is a big topic that I wouldn't probably like to assume prior knowledge on, because it is somehow new for some people. So the three concepts that you mentioned, let's for example start with responsible global citizenship. So this concept is very personal. So we leave business aside for a second and we focus on the person. This concept entails, you know, an awareness on the first place of the interdependence of individuals and systems but also not just that, but also the sense of responsibility that follows from it. So this is, first, there is a responsibility to understand your perspective, other people's perspective, how different countries and people are interconnected in global issues. But there's also a responsibility to respect the principle of cultural diversity, to make connections and relationship in other cultures. But as I said, it doesn't stop there. There is the global citizens need to play an activist role, if you want to see it like that. So for that, there is a responsibility to advocate for a series of things. For example, greater international corporations, the implementation of international agreements or conventions for global challenges, and also for advocate for more effective global equity and justice, for example. So it is essential that today's business and government leaders become responsible citizens if they weren't already, but also that we make an effort to make children, which are going to be the future business and government leader, responsible citizens. I can continue about this, but I'll come back to that point later in the session. Social entrepreneurship, you said. Well, social entrepreneurships or social entrepreneurs are individuals that have innovative, and this point I think is very important, innovative solutions to societal most pressing problems, whether these are social, cultural, or environmental. So there is definitely a social component or mission, which is their focus. So they prioritize the social benefits to the maximization of profit. Does it mean that, as some people think, that social entrepreneurs don't have to get a profit? Well, you have to get enough to stay in the market, because as a market as a company, as a social enterprise, you can actually take very different forms. You can actually be a corporate philanthropy, like, for example, the Microsoft or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You can be a not-for-profit, but also you can be like a hybrid organization. You can be a for-profit organization. So that doesn't matter. So it is not so much about whether you make or don't make profit. You always have to make enough to stay in the market, otherwise you wouldn't last too long. But it's about doing good. No matter the profit, you're doing good, and that is the vision. So I also wanted to quickly highlight that we talk a lot about entrepreneurship from creating a whole new company, but it's also more and more common that we talk about social intrapreneurship. So this is a person that within an existing organization, it might be a for-profit company, create a socially oriented, whether this is a project or an area or a department or an initiative. So if people already have their company, they shouldn't say, well, that's not my orientation, I cannot change now, too bad, too late. So I just wanted to say you can still do social intrapreneurship within existing companies. And as you were mentioning, that because I work internationally, I can see that culturally there are large differences in respect to social entrepreneurship, which comes from the different levels of understanding that different cultures or countries have about this topic and the perception that they have about it. I was doing a bit of research to see whether or where South Africa actually stands. And it's been this year that Thomson Reuters said that South Africa, together with Indonesia, were named as the top countries where social entrepreneurship is gaining momentum. So it's still not in the top 5. So they are saying top 5 is Canada, Australia, France, Belgium, Singapore. But they're also highlighting that there are countries like Indonesia, South Africa, where it's gaining a lot of momentum. So generally, social entrepreneurship around the world, we could say, in general terms, is growing. And it's growing because there's more awareness. There's more awareness of people about what it is and how can I earn a living and at the same time do good. That's something that people or less people will think about years ago. There's also the support of international organizations. For example, I work closely with the European Commission, and they have this since 2011, this social business initiative. And so it's still on today. And they started by identifying which are the actions that can really make a difference and how can we improve the situation on the ground of social enterprises. The EC, or the European Commission, is also working with the OECD. They do some studies and provide advice also to government and social entrepreneur. There are more support as a consequence from governments, national, regional, local also are making efforts in this direction. The financial sector is also making progress, because one of the main problems of social entrepreneur, traditionally, you could say, it was the lack of access to funding or enough funding. And that comes again from the lack of understanding of bank. Okay, can you say that again? What are you going to do? That you want to help who? And how are you going to make money? And how are we going to get our loan back? So now also banks, whether these are multilateral development banks such as the World Bank, they have social entrepreneurship programs, contests, competitions for young entrepreneurs, e-learning courses. The Inter-American Development Bank also have a large funding program, a coach team, but even commercial banks. There is the case of Bancolombia. So this is one of the banks in Colombia that a few years ago, they just rethought the whole mission and the positioning and established themselves as a responsible bank in 3 areas like social, economic, and environmental. Today is the company with the best reputation in the whole country. And even Santander Bank, that I also work with, also have a specific program for social entrepreneurs, a training fund. They have an entrepreneurship chair within a university, and also social entrepreneurship awards. That makes you think that people are increasing their understanding and their effort at all levels towards social entrepreneurship. And probably the very last thing is that if we think who are going to be the future leaders and the future customer, if you are a business, this is going to be Generation Z. And for these people that are born after 1995, any study that they do on them, they say that the great majority of them deeply care about social and environmental issues. So they've already showed that, I think, with this climate change initiative they started last year, and also that they are skeptical of brands. So if you want to attract loyal employers, and if you want to have loyal customers, even if it's just for that, you better start caring about the greater good as well in your company in many different ways, because there are many ways to do that we can discuss later. But I don't want to just keep you for any longer, because I know that my other two panelists have very good ideas to share as well with you. So that's
Thanks,
also my
Victoria, for setting the scene for us beautifully. And there's some pieces from what you've said that I'd like to come back to when we speak to Corley, specifically around the social entrepreneurship and the corporate social investment in South Africa. But before we get to Corley, Linda, on your side, I always tell people the story that I heard from Sister Ethel, and that is that the Missionvale Care Center started with just 11 cents in a matchbox, and a mandate given to Sister Ethel, the founder, by the community to build them a church. So the rest, they say, is history. Today, you are feeding more than 900 families a week. The Nomoil Primary School provides school and enrichment for the kids in the community. You have a medical center, and there's even a micro industry for the female entrepreneurs. So if I had to look at it, I consider Missionvale to be a micro economy in some ways. Can you maybe explain to us the business model of an NGO, and then how COVID-19 has impacted your day-to-day operations at the center?
Thank you, and thank you for that lovely introduction. So our business model is based on three cornerstones. The first being sound finances, secondly, good governance, and then three, a very big important one, remaining true to our ethos of respect, dignity, and compassion, that we have such a brilliant example in our founder, Sister Ethel. And so we have, as you mentioned, we have a holistic approach to poverty relief. So we work in three main areas of health, education, and skills development. And of course, we rely very heavily on fundraising to sustain our activities. And within that, there are various income streams, be it from corporates, from individuals, grant applications, and things like that. Our business model changes constantly as the center evolves. And so when we did our strategic plan, we had to look at how can we continue providing services while building capacity in the community so that they can become self-sustaining, and how we can also become more self-sustaining as a nonprofit. So we have been expanding on some of our income-generating projects. And then you were asking about the effect of COVID-19. So, being reliant on other people to sustain us, it's been such that we were talking about this earlier, that this is unprecedented, that this is globally affecting everybody. So where before possibly, if things in South Africa weren't going so great, we could look internationally. Now everybody is affected. Locally, the impact economically has just been devastating. The Missionvale Township is home to some of our city's poorest citizens. And, some of them may have had some form of employment, be it as a domestic worker or gardener or hairdresser or something like that. And a lot of them have lost their employment because their employers have lost their employment. So it's been a domino effect. So the effect on us as a center is that people that previously were not relying on us are now looking to us for services. And on the flip side, people that were able to support us are now battling so much that they're not able to give the support that they used to.
Belinda, that probably makes it very, very difficult for you to plan from the administration side. I mean, any business model, irrespective of whether it's for-profit or an NPO, relies on sustainable cash flow streams. in order to budget, plan, and deliver to their stakeholders. Your stakeholders are the community, and some of them don't have an alternative option. Talk to us a little bit about your financial planning and how that comes together.
Yeah, so as you say, it does make it very difficult because under normal circumstance, you often see that donors give as a once-off or on an ad hoc basis. There's very little repeat giving happening. And now, of course, with COVID-19, we have had some unexpected expenses. So we've actually opened up a special COVID-19 fund to cover things like fuel. Before people would access us under lockdown level 5, we had to go and deliver the food parcels. We had to get protective equipment for our staff to keep them safe. You know, these are all expenses that, you know, when we sat doing the 2020 budget, you know, those weren't in there. I mean, of course, we look every year. And one of the biggest challenges affecting nonprofits is that, you know, every year you sit and you do your planning, and we know what our program costs are. We know we're going to need so much to run the school, so much to run the nutrition, so much for all of our activities. And we have a rough idea of where the funding for that might come from. But what often happens is, especially with grant applications, you almost have to prove you don't need the money to get the money. So you need to show how you're going to sustain yourself beyond the grant period. And that is often a little bit trickier. So, you know, it makes it really difficult when you're looking to see what income are we guaranteed of, because that list suddenly becomes a lot smaller. You know, you can do so many applications, you can put your fishing rod in so many pools, but you're not necessarily guaranteed that income. So that does make it very difficult from a financial planning point of view.
Thanks, Linda. Let's bring Paulie into the conversation. And Paulie, you and I have walked the good corporate governance and sustainability road for about 2 decades in South Africa now. And then in 2010, we also engaged on the codes for responsible investment. I believe you're doing some more work on that. And then since 2010, after the 2008 subprime crisis, we've seen a greater focus on responsible social reporting in the form of the Global Reporting Index, which we know as the GRI, the UN Global Compact, and now the Sustainable Development Goals. And South Africa has also led the integrated reporting agenda. And this all brings about a better alignment between people, planets, and profits. So in my mind, you know, I was saying earlier to Victoria, South Africa has always been quite proactive on the reporting end, and the objectives have always been there. Now, before we hear your views, for me, a good shift was in 2019, if I recall, when the CEO of BlackRock Asset Managers. Now, BlackRock is the world's largest asset management company with about $7.4 million in assets under management. And CEO Larry Fink made this game-changing statement in his letter to shareholders, and I'll just read 2 extracts out. He said, "The importance of serving stakeholders and embracing purpose is becoming increasingly central to the way that companies understand their role in society. Ultimately, purpose is the engine of long-term profitability." He went on to say that, you know, BlackRock are going to now purposefully start re-looking and rethinking their investment models, and where necessary, pull out of the investments where they don't believe it's a responsible investment case. Paulie, talk to us about what does responsible investment mean? How well is this activated by businesses in South Africa? And what practical impact have these frameworks had on our society?
Thanks, Roshni. It's difficult to come in after the 2 ladies before me who do such important work on the ground, and from where I sit, you know, it's much higher level, and you know, looking at how companies and investors are having conversations about things like responsible business and responsible investment. So, I mean, I think the interesting case about South Africa, and this was our experience at the JSE when we created the SRI index in 2004, is that the corporate world was far more advanced and proactive in terms of taking action, particularly in relation to reporting on their social and environmental impacts. And when we created the index, the investment world, if you will, or the investment community in South Africa was less involved, although there were provisions in the Pension Funds Act for what was termed socially responsible investments and a percentage of investment to go towards your pure SRI. Moving on 20 years, I mean, the environment has shifted completely, as you also alluded to. And within the investment community, the conversation is pre-COVID, a very different conversation in the sense that there is a much higher awareness of the need to make sure that money is spent in a way that can achieve not only a financial return, but also have a social and environmental impact. I think one of the challenges, though, is that the environment has become more complex in the sense that with this fantastic growth and interest that we have seen globally, there's almost now been a spectrum that's been created between, your pure financial return investments to your pure philanthropic investments. And in the middle, there is a range of aspects and approaches that investors can pursue, which I think is fantastic because it offers them different opportunities and gives them the opportunity to consider what might work best for their particular investment portfolio. You get, for example, the one very big upcoming area is impact investment, where the primary intention of the investment is not a financial return, but mainly a social or environmental impact. There may still be some requirements for financial return, but the pure requirement is, or the main requirement is to have an impact. So your traditional SRI, as we knew it 20 years ago, still exists in the shape of your ethical theme and value-based investments where negative screening takes place and certain industries are excluded because of the activities that they are involved in. But certainly in the investment community today in South Africa, impact investment is growing significantly, and there is a lot of focus on integrating ESG, or environment, society, and governance considerations into how impact is assessed and how investment decisions are made. So, I mean, on the face of it, this might seem quite removed from what Linda, for example, is doing. But I think certainly what this means is that there is greater scope to bring in a wider variety of investment opportunities if they were positioned in a way that would, attract an investor. One of the big targets of the whole responsible investment movement is your large asset owners, the large pension funds, insurance companies, etc. In South Africa, for example, we have the Government Employees Pension Fund, which is one of the largest funds in the world. And you would have seen also in the media a lot of talk about, the potential to access some of the funding or the investment portfolio of the Government Employees Pension Fund to fund infrastructure investment, failing state-owned entities, and so on. I won't express myself about that at this stage, but suffice to say that those kinds of organizations can have a significant influence in where impact is made, and how investment portfolios can integrate these important considerations. But if I flip just quickly over to the other side of the spectrum, where you were asking me about companies and frameworks and so on, certainly something like integrated reporting is making a big impact in assisting reporting organizations to reflect in an integrated fashion not only their financial performance and financial impact, but across what is called a multiple capital approach. So your social and relationship capital, your assets, which is manufactured capital, intellectual, human, and then also very importantly the environmental capital. So companies that are doing integrated reporting, and as you mentioned, South Africa has been leading in this sense, because our companies were required to start doing it from the introduction of King 4. Well, actually King 3 before that, from 2010, 2011 onwards. And with King 4 in 2016, just cementing that, particularly the JSE listed companies have had to pursue integrated reporting or explain why they are not doing so. So that, I think, also gives a different perspective to investors to get a holistic picture of what a company is doing. And I'd like to, in the context of this conversation, just also state that it's not limited to the listed community that we're talking to. Yes, they are more in the public face and they have regulatory requirements in terms of having to do this. But it's essentially for any kind of organization capable of doing reporting to be able to do this. And in terms of King 4 also, that governance that King 4 drives is also something that is targeted at any kind of organization. And governance plays such an important role in bridging that gap, or the perception gap perhaps, between the investor that provides the capital and the person who then implements that capital, whether you're a listed company or a social entrepreneur. That communication and that understanding of what is the business case and what's the investment case, I think is quite an important thing where governance plays a role. But let me stop there, and if you have any more questions, throw them my way.
Yeah, thank you, Corley. So the aspect of governance has come to the fore in quite a disturbing way. To those of you who are joining us from overseas during the COVID crisis, the government in South Africa had prepared food parcels for distribution to those most in need. And during the course of delivery, those food parcels went missing, didn't find their ways to those who are looking for it. South Africa, there are about 3.5 million people who have suboptimal levels of nutrition. So this becomes a major issue. So Corley, thank you for raising the questions around governance. There's an interesting question here, which brings it together from Todd. So in this context, Todd says, whereby social enterprise tends to be more vulnerable during a time of crisis. And secondly, their services are essential services, addressing those who cannot pay for them. How can we ensure that these organizations survive in the coming period? And this question actually tries to bring together the balance between investors who seek a return, and usually it's a financial return. Paulie, you have some interesting views on, do we actually need a financial return? And Linda, from your space, it's a case of survival. How do you survive your business models and continue giving to the people who are lining up in the food queues? And then Victoria, you sit in the influencing and the policy advocacy space. How do we find a mechanism to start converting these academic discussions and these corporate reporting guidelines, which all have really good intent, and start mobilizing it on the ground? Is there some form of bridge that's working well, as an example? Victoria overseas, or Corley, if you've seen any in South Africa or Africa?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, Roshni, and I think the question really coins the challenge that we will be facing going forward. Already research is showing that organizations, and particularly reporting organizations, are reinvestigating their purpose, and you referred to purpose earlier on. But I also think that we are seeing that they're reconsidering where their money goes in terms of, not only foundation spend and corporate social investment, but just generally in a business spend. Most of them have slashed salary and wage bills as kind of a first port of call. And I think what we will really need to do is to, for organizations to be challenged to think about how to survive within a context that doesn't only survive in a financial way, but doesn't destroy the livelihoods of the people that are directly connected to them and those that they are positioned to influence. I don't think there is a hard and fast answer to that or an ideal solution. But I think what we will likely see is a far more focus on local empowerment, local procurement, and businesses supporting each other locally, because you can have that conversation about what the other one needs. In terms of how reporting frameworks fit into that, I think it's important that clarity and the accountability and the transparency is emphasized very strongly. To be very honest and frank about the difficulty that the company may be facing, and to then discuss what it needs in order to go forward. One of the big challenges and one of the shortcomings of companies in terms of reporting, and this is not only, again, listed companies, I talk about any organization, is, they like to paint the pretty picture. And what we really need to see is balanced reporting in terms of, look, things are not going great, but this is the continued value proposition that we offer. But we will need to be able to meet each other halfway to make that a reality. I don't have an example at the moment, but maybe Victoria has an example of global examples of what's happening.
Yeah, Victoria, let's go there. Are there good examples that you can probably cite globally or in Europe around what's happened during COVID and how companies have kind of pivoted their purpose or applied what they stand for towards a humanitarian cause? Linda, have you seen this in action at Mission Vale? So let's start with Victoria.
Yeah, probably just quickly, I wanted to cite a study that was done last month by Bloomberg. And obviously it's only a partial analysis because this has not finished. So we don't know how this is going to end up. But they were checking how are different companies doing, and they were comparing it with their sustainability programs and their triple bottom line programs. So they actually saw that those companies that were more sustainable were facing the crisis better, meaning that their profits were not suffering that much. And I think that's where the key point can be. We are assuming that these socially responsible organizations are going to suffer more, but people might think they like instinctively, but do they? We don't know. And there seems to be sign that says that they might be more resilient. As a starting point, they're usually more agile organizations, so they can pivot more easily. They are organizations that are able to take care of their employees better, which they also value. So there's not this bad publicity, and also to take care of the environment, because we've seen the effect of people, if not fully stopping, highly reducing business activity, mostly manufacturing activity. So we've seen the effect that it has had in the environment and what has happened when it has come back, even partially. So it's when people started wondering, who are the companies that pollute the most? Who are the ones that actually have programs to control that? So I'd like to keep some positivity, even if it's holding to those initial results, and think that these companies are actually going to be able to face adversity better. And if they do better financially, then that's another reason for investors of this is a good place to go, not just for the sustainability aspect, but also for the profit one. And from a government point of view, if we go to a very practical way of doing and saying things, if these companies fail, the government will have to do that. So it's cheaper for the government to help these companies so they can continue doing what they're doing, because they are a multiplier effect of the company that are doing well and are helping communities. Because if they don't do it, then it will be on the government's very long list of tasks to do, and that will be more expensive because it will be later and because it will be on them. So even from a practical point of view, the government has to help.
Linda, have you found yourself as an administrator at Mission Vale at a point where you see your funds are running out and you're not getting any new funds topped up? Have you experienced that? And if something like that were to happen, what is your mitigation plan to get a fresh injection of capital when most needed?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we have seen that to a degree. It was interesting in April when COVID hit South Africa. It was almost a knee-jerk reaction. You were asking about, what has been highlighted during this time, and interestingly, the need for food, the back to basics, the very, very basic need, that suddenly has come to the forefront. So in April, there was almost this surge in donations coming in, particularly for food, which is an area we've previously always struggled with terribly to argue the case for. A lot of donors don't see food as a sustainable intervention. You give somebody something to eat today, what are they going to do the next day? So it was interesting. And then as much as it surged in April, then there was almost like this pullback as people started feeling it in their own pockets. So it's what we've done at the center is I was talking about our income generating activities. So we have a crafters unit where our ladies are producing locally manufactured goods. And in the past, it was just a little shop with sort of African beaded items and things. And when people came and visited, they could buy. In the last year, we expanded that to be more corporate gifting so that, there would be more repeat orders coming in. And I'm very proud of our ladies now in the midst of all of this. They were very quick to jump on the mask manufacturing side. So now we're manufacturing masks. We've done for the police. And the orders are pouring in. So that's been a big good thing that's come out of all of this. Then just maybe to answer Todd's question as well, what can be done? And Victoria, you touched on it as well, is, the businesses that take care of their employees. So if you are a business, look at where your employees reside. If you look at Port Elizabeth, a lot of the automotive component manufacturers are in sort of close to the Mission Vale area. So your employees would be largely coming from those areas. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to invest in the areas where your employees live, uplift those areas, because it has a domino effect once again in employee wellness, less absenteeism, and a positive attitude, I think, towards the companies.
Sounds like the word resilient certainly can be linked to Mission Vale or an NGO like that. In the conference that I was watching, hosted by the UN Secretary General, the CEO of the JSE, Leila Fourie, made an interesting statement saying that we don't have a crisis of availability of funds, but rather around how those funds are allocated. She was talking in that sense around the international financing models and the complexity facing emerging market countries and their ability to apply the sustainable development goals. What should business owners, business leaders, and funders be thinking about now when pivoting or recalibrating their strategic objectives so that by 2025, 2030, we can have a more equal and more inclusive society? Panel, what are your thoughts on that? Let's start with Victoria.
I believe, I think like everyone else, that since this term of the 3 Ps was coined in the mid-90s, has been a lot of talk about it. It has been in practically every annual report of every company and every PR action. But they haven't done probably enough. Generally, only a few companies really has taken that to action, and I think the key is still probably education and awareness, in the sense that we need to get better at looking at those 3 objectives as things that are not in conflict, but they can actually help each other. And I think COVID has already shown us the need to have those three legs. But I guess we go back to people not being aware of it, people not believing on it because they haven't seen enough good examples, people even wanted to do it, but not knowing how to do it. But also, even if they think they know how to do it, they're gonna find major difficulties, probably and mostly because of the measurements. As much as it's very easy to measure the profit P, the people and the planet P's are quite hard to measure. I mean, should we use dollars or rands for it? And maybe you could say an index can be a bit more realistic, so we compare what different companies really do without putting dollars value to it. But then we're comparing donations for food with the protections of animals and wetlands, and I mean they're not comparable either. So I guess measurement is still the big pending issue in respect to the applicability of that. First, awareness, then some sort of coaching, and if I have to go back to government, what I would really be doing if I had the opportunity to rule a country, big or small right now, will be to really give vouchers to companies for like sustainability vouchers, because some of them really do not know how to do it. So you either do the training or you either provide some sort of free coach, because again, for the government will be cheaper to do that now and then benefit from the effect that that's going to have than to have to sort things out later. But definitely going forward, if it was not a question until now of the need of have those 3 Ps, going forward even less. So I think really taking ownership of these global issues, it should constitute like the new leadership mandate going forward. And we've seen some good examples. We just have to spread the word and help those companies that want to do it but still do not know how to do it.
We had some good examples of leaders who've activated the 3 Ps during COVID. And I like how you coined it, that it's about taking the ownership and seeing yourself as part of the solution rather than leaving it up to governments and regulators. Corley, from your side, what would your thoughts be on this matter?
Well, I think Victoria has really, she's really put her finger on the pulse, in talking about some of the challenges being in measurement, and certainly in terms of, social and environmental aspects even more so. It's sometimes, perhaps the social more, it's often difficult to quantify exactly. And so that paradigm shift that needs to happen within the investment community, in terms of, essentially 2 things, in understanding what the impact is, and being able to measure it in a way that, may not be something that you can easily plug into an analytics model, but maybe something that needs some more interpretation of qualitative information. That is a developing area and something where I think a lot of focus will need to be put going forward. That's the one aspect. And I think the other aspect is being able to understand that even in the midst of a crisis, we need to bear the long game in mind. We need to be able to respond to the immediate challenges as well, but we also want to be able to build back better, as the hashtag goes, for the longer term. And I think, particularly in the sustainability context, issues like climate change and so on are not going away. They will remain there, and so one shouldn't lose sight of what the important things are also that's going to be coming back at us, and to be able to have that resilience, as you say, and that agility to be able to deal with that bigger picture. If anything, COVID has shown us the real power of disruption. I mean, disruption is a word that gets thrown around quite a lot, but I don't think anybody really comprehended what it meant until, the entire world came to a standstill. And it's demonstrating to us what is needed to be able to be resilient. But I also think it's demonstrating to us what is possible. because, times of crisis breeds innovation, and Linda was referring to some of that, and there are other great examples as well. And I think the important thing moving forward, or one of the most important things moving forward in terms of growing investment in this space, is to demonstrate the ability of the sector to be that resilient and to innovate and provide services on an ongoing basis, where many other businesses are unable to reopen their doors. The social impact environment where they can't close their doors because they deliver an essential service, as Todd was alluding to in his question. I think demonstrating that bare will to carry on, I think, is something that deserves to be taken note of.
Thanks. So let's just read Lisa's comment out. To what extent has impact investing been experienced by stakeholders in Nelson Mandela Bay? That includes social entrepreneurs, NPOs, etc. It would be great to see some of the innovative financing tools being introduced globally, implemented on the local radar to stimulate local social investment platforms. So, Linda, carrying on with this theme, if business leaders and political leaders start taking ownership of this, Corley, if we start re-looking at our strategic objectives, our investment portfolios, our investment models, what are we aligning that to? Is there a South African or an African or regional kind of SDG top 5 that we're all vying towards? So, Linda, if all this comes into play in the most harmonious way, how would it impact your business model? In other words, if the 3 big companies in Port Elizabeth all put education and healthcare on the top of their priority list, but you're needing the basic of food and PPE for your communities, I mean, where does that balance lie?
Thank you. I think that it's very important, and one thing that I'd really love to see happen is that there is a big understanding of what a nonprofit needs. And we spoke about the intent is good. The giving is always, the intention is very good. I want to use an example of a donor, choosing possibly to donate iPads to a school when the kids are going hungry. I would love to see investments more effective. And for that to happen, you need to understand that, the children cannot learn on an patient cannot take medication effectively without the food. So it's again coming back to knowing what the basic needs are. I think for a lot of corporates, they are very hard pressed to show hardcore outcomes. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to show that with food. But what I would appeal to people is to understand that investing into something now that may seem like a basic need still contributes to the need in the long term. I've read up on studies about hunger. Childhood hunger affects you for the rest of your life. The psychological studies show that. So by making an investment, I'm just using food as an example here, but by investing in that does not take away from the long-term goals of making people more self-sustaining, getting the children educated and leading them out of poverty. It doesn't take away from that at all. But what I often find is that some places are, because of their trust deeds or anything, that specifically prohibited from giving cash contributions or contributing, for example, to salaries. A lot of people, I always call that the not so sexy part of fundraising. A lot of people would rather do something far more tangible than that. But what happens then is people will often say, if we pay for the stationery for the school, which is obviously a need as well, it would free up funding for you to use that elsewhere. But the reality is, if everybody has that same thought pattern, we end up with boxes and boxes of stationery, but no means to pay a teacher. And without that, a school cannot run. So my answer to that would be, really go and understand the needs of a nonprofit. Understand that like any other business, we have background expenses, we have overheads, we have salaries, we have all these other expenses to run effectively. So it would be important for people to understand that and to maximize your giving, because the other trend that we also see is, I like to call it spreading the love. So businesses may say, this year we are doing something for an environmental cause. Next year it will be the elderly. The year after it might be cancer or something like that. And by the time your turn comes around, 10 years have gone by and you've had to sustain yourself as a nonprofit. And on the flip side, for the corporate, you've spent an awful lot of money, and yet where is your impact really? So I would really encourage repeat targeted giving in line with what the nonprofit that you choose, in line with their needs.
Linda, is there a index that lists all the non-profit organizations in our areas or in our country? And then, Corley, is there any validation and verification mechanisms? So if I'm an investor or business, from a governance point of view, I want to know that I'm investing my money in somewhere where it's going to be utilized for the intended purpose. Is there an index that we have like that in the place, or Victoria, perhaps globally? Are you aware of something like that?
I'm not aware of one in South Africa or globally. There've been several attempts at creating, sort of a database, and there's a few online, but there's not one specific centralized point that I can say, this is where you can go, where you can see exactly what each one does, where their focus areas lie, and also where, perhaps they've been vetted by an external person that will trust. I'm not aware. There may be, but I'm not aware of one.
Paulie, to your knowledge, is there anything out there?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there are tools, but they're mostly individual and targeted tools. What we have started to see is, in for example, in the debt environment where the issuance of green bonds and increasingly also social impact bonds are growing. Obviously, there needs to be some form of verification or measurement. So, but mostly where those instruments are being launched is where the verification system sits. There isn't not in terms of my awareness, and certainly not locally, a universal one. There are targeted ones. There are well-known and acknowledged systems, for example, measuring your social return on investment or measuring the greenness of a project and so on. So there are, but similar to what we're seeing in the reporting environment, it is unfortunately still quite a fragmented space, and that limits the comparability between various instruments, unfortunately.
So maybe that is a opportunity that one could look into, and to say, it sounds like greater alignment's required between those who have the capital to invest and to better understand the needs of the NPOs on the ground. Because it sounds like there's some stakeholder engagement not quite taking place. And I'm looking at this from a practical perspective. So we've got 2 minutes left, panel. If you were given 67 days to drive one action to create a more equal and inclusive society within your areas of influence, what would that be, and what is the key success factor? Quickly. Victoria, let's go with you.
Oh, difficult. I guess that, dreaming is free, and I'd like to see many, many radical changes in the world. But if you have to focus on one, I'm a firm believer that education is the most powerful tool weapon to change the world. So I would say, if I have to do something, it will be quality education for all. This is obviously a long-term investment, but I think education should be the means for developing, at the end of the day, socially responsible global citizens, and provide them not just with the knowledge, but also with the skills and the values that they need. Thanks.
So Victoria, we envisage that would start from school and get the culture going around thinking beyond profits, thinking beyond yourself, and actually having the spirit of giving. That's beautiful. Thank you. Pauline, from your side, your 67 days?
I mean, I cannot disagree with Victoria. I think the education and the skills development is critical, but she will, while she's running with that, where I think I will focus my 67 days is in the corporate boardroom, because I think a lot of the conversation in the boardroom is still not integrated enough, and to help them understand the difference that they can make and the impact that they can make by thinking beyond profit, I think is a worthwhile cause for the long term. And when I say the boardroom, I don't only mean the corporate boardrooms, but also the large institutional investors.
Absolutely. Thank you, Corey, and I'll join you there. And I think it's almost opportune that you're doing some work again on the PRESA codes, and maybe that's an opportunity there. Linda, from your side, what do you want to see on the ground, and quickly, because we're on 11:30 already?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big question, Roshni, but in a nutshell, again, what Victoria and Corley have said as well, definitely education. For me, my heart is also very much with early childhood development and giving a happy childhood. Yeah. I think much can come out of that in the long term, and getting government more interested in that topic as well.
Ladies, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I feel like we haven't even touched the surface of this. So perhaps we need to formulate some kind of work group to, delve into the detail a bit more and come up with some solutions. But really, thank you for your time and for sharing your insights and knowledge. To those who've joined us, we had just under 20 participants today. Some of them had to leave early. Thank you for investing your time with us. With Mandela Day being on the 18th of June, just 10 days away, we hope that this has planted the seeds for responsible citizenship in your space and that you can apply it to your business strategies. I'd like to end off with a quote from Tata Madiba, and he says, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." With that, I'll leave you. Thank you very much. Join us again on the 12th of August for our next webinar, and take care. Till next time, bye-bye.